Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in. You know that feeling when you're trying so incredibly hard to grow spiritually, but the effort itself is just exhausting you? Well, today we're exploring some profound Hasidic texts that suggest a really fascinating idea. What if trying so hard to be spiritual is actually the exact thing holding you back? We're going to break down a massive psychological paradigm shift here, moving from intensely fighting our ego to simply observing it. I really want you to keep this question in mind as we go through the explainer today. We so often feel like there's this massive, impenetrable brick wall between us and our higher selves, right? Or between us and true divine connection. But what if it isn't solid at all? What if it's fluid? Believe me, this shift in perspective changes absolutely everything about how we approach our own inner struggles. So, Section 1, the wave that hides, understanding the barrier. Now, what's really interesting here is the Hebrew word gal. King David famously prays to God, "Gal I, open my eyes so I may see the wonders of your Torah." But get this, gal literally means wave. The text reveals a beautiful secret here. This barrier in our minds, it isn't a brick wall, it's a wave. And what do you do with a wave? You don't smash into it, you dive right through it, or you ride it. It's actually meant to be passed through. It's completely an illusion of solidity. Moving on to Section 2, the surviving child, meeting the natural soul. So the text refers to this barrier as the natural soul, but psychologically speaking, we can kind of understand it as the surviving child. And this part of us stands in stark contrast to the divine soul. See, the surviving child is constantly anxious, always needing to control situations, and ironically enough, it loves to fight the ego, which of course just feeds it. On the flip side, the divine soul is just present. It's observant, incredibly peaceful, and it just naturally knows how to let go. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why we get stuck so often. Just look at these traits. The surviving child completely blocks us from the present moment. Why? Because it's way too busy being terrified of the future or, frustrated by the past. It's obsessed with seeking conditional love, acting a certain way just to be accepted by others. It feels like this completely isolated, separate entity in the universe, which obviously causes immense stress. When you're operating from this identity, you literally cannot experience divine unity. It's just not possible. Which brings us to Section 3, the secret of letting go and shifting your identity. Okay, so here is the practical psychological method laid out in 3 super simple steps. First, just notice your inner child reacting. Maybe you feel a sudden flash of anger or a spike of anxiety. Second, and honestly, this is absolutely crucial, stop fighting it. Fighting the ego requires energy, and that energy just makes the ego stronger. It's like adding fuel to the fire. Third, simply observe it. Just watch the feeling like a wave passing by, viewing it from the calm, peaceful perspective of your higher soul. The beautiful truth here is that the very moment you step back to observe this anxious child without judgment, you're naturally no longer identifying with it. You've effectively stepped out of the wave. By just watching it, your identity effortlessly shifts over to the divine soul. And without your active engagement, without you fighting it, the surviving child naturally calms down and just surrenders to the soul's guidance. Section 4. Simple as a baby. Simplicity in prayer. There's this truly wonderful quote from the great Hasidic mentor Reb Mendel Futterfass. When he was asked how to pray properly, he said, "Don't exert effort in prayer, just let the simple words take you." Overexerting, trying so hard to achieve a high spiritual level, well, that's really just the surviving child wanting another achievement to put on the fridge. True connection actually comes when you drop all that effort and just let the simple words wash over you. To really ground this idea, the source text shares a brilliant contrast. Think of a man who's strained and pushed himself all through Yom Kippur, standing the entire time, trying to force this massive spiritual high, only to end up feeling totally disconnected and exhausted. Why? Because the whole thing was ego-driven. Now, contrast that with a 3-year-old child. The narrator describes his grandson, who completely ignored a noisy, super distracting toy tractor stuck under a chair and simply, purely, reached up to kiss the mezuzah on the doorpost. Pure presence. Absolutely no ego blocking the way. That, right there, is the ultimate goal.
All right, Section 5. 2 Talmuds, Babylonian versus Jerusalem.
The texts compare 2 foundational works here, the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud represents the old wave spiritual work, It was composed in exile, in darkness. It's full of intense effort, endless questions, arguments, and fighting to refine the ego. It's heavy, but the Jerusalem Talmud, that represents the Messianic era. It's characterized by light, revelation, and simply seeing the truth. It's pure observation, entirely without that painful struggle. So the absolutely crucial point here is how incredibly hard it is to let go of our addiction to the struggle. The Talmud actually records that the great sage Rabbi Zerah fasted 100 times when he moved to Israel. 100 times. And why? Not to learn something new, but to forget the Babylonian way of learning. He literally had to actively clear out the old habits of struggle and fighting just to make room for the pure, effortless sight of the Jerusalem way.
Section 6. Lag BaOmer, breaking the barriers.
The mystical tradition actually maps out a timeline for us. Before Mount Sinai, the spiritual and physical worlds were totally divided, a completely solid wall. Then, at the splitting of the Red Sea, there was a partial breaking of that barrier. But the text explains that it was on the mystical holiday of Lag BaOmer, through the teachings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that the deepest barriers, that gall or wave between the infinite upper worlds and our everyday physical reality, were completely and totally shattered. And this brings us to why this matters for you right now, today. Because of this historical and spiritual shift, you are already granted the divine power to stop fighting yourself. The heavy lifting, it's been done. You can look right through that wave of anxiety or ego and experience absolute unity and infinite connection in the most simple, present, everyday actions. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a final thought to carry into your day. We spend so much of our lives at war with ourselves, right? Thinking that's the only way to grow. But if you actually put down the sword, if you finally let go of the struggle and just observe, what divine wonders will your open eyes finally see? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.